Potential for conflict has risen significantly in a number of regions around the world, including in Eurasia. We see that if earlier NATO countries limited themselves to supporting the Kiev regime, which came to power through illegal armed means and a coup d'etat, they are now openly saying in the West that they are preparing for war with us and are increasing their defense budgets. To justify this spending and the radical militarization of their states, NATO and European Union leaders continue, as before, to resort to false claims about an alleged military threat from Russia.
EU3 recently met, and they agreed that they are going to stick with their maximalist demands on Russia, a ceasefire along existing contact lines, precisely nothing more, with all the rest of the European demands in it, and that they are going to ramp up their production of long-range missiles, attacking deep into Russia. The British have just announced a new one that they've have already tested and is in operation, and was actually probably one of the ones. It was either that or a storm shadow that hit Voronezh in the last few days. And these are missiles capable of hitting targets more than 500 kilometers away, speed of 600 kph, and carrying a 225 warhead. So they're ramping up. They've got a contract, 150,000 of these. They're going to give in sort of knockdown form to Ukraine to fire into Russia. And so Russia is simply not accepting it. It is, first of all, and this is a big change, Ushakov, who's the spokesman for Putin, the main spokesperson for Putin, has said very, very plainly in this, we thought we had some understandings with Trump after the Anchorage meetings. We so-called Anchorage understandings. They are over. We are not trying that. Now Russia is not interested in diplomacy or in negotiations. It is interested only in military victory. That is from Putin's spokesperson. Then later, there was a statement by Putin to cadets, which you just put up, which was it was made historical links back to the date a year earlier, years earlier, the anniversary. And it really said to the cadets, look, Europe and America are escalating against us, and they are suggesting we are threatening them. They're inverting it. They are saying Russia is threatening them, and they use the fact that we try to defend ourselves as proof of our threat to Europe. And so they militarize and they prepare for war. And so I say to you, young people, I hope it's not going to happen. I'm not saying it will, but Russia now must prepare for war with Europe and America.
Now, that's obviously a very troubling statement, because if you have, and we've talked many times about the literal threats and declarations from everybody from Friedrich Merz out of Germany, from France, from NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Ursula von der Leyen. I mean, all of them. And you could go up into Poland and several other NATO countries as well in the Baltics. They keep talking about, we got to get ready for war. You have German troops have been pushed literally into the Baltics already with a brigade, an armored brigade. Everybody's going up with more of these spending. And now here you have the other side of that saying, okay, then if that's where it's going to get, then we're also going to prepare for war. As somebody who's steeped in diplomacy and has lots of historical knowledge about the continent over the last 100 years or so, how worried are you that this is a self-fulfilling prophecy and one of these days we're going to get into a conflict?
I'm very worried, because I think the leadership in Europe is so stupid that they think that they have a clever plan. That if only they can sort of prepare the battlescape sufficiently with their long-range missiles striking into Russia, they can show that Ukraine is actually on the front foot and Russia is on a back foot, and they can say to America, to Trump. Now, America, you've got to come back to Europe, and you've got to join us in a war on Russia, just as they did all that time ago in the Second World War. Pull Roosevelt into a war that he didn't want to join, but now they are trying to do that. So they're building up Ukraine as a sort of mailed fist that is going to stand in front, because the Europeans don't have many troops or actually means to wage a war. So the Ukrainians are to be the sort of shock forces at the front. The Europeans will stand behind that, and then America will come and provide all the necessary infrastructure so that Europe can fly wingtip to wingtip with the United States to destroy Russia. This is a fantasy. Just be clear, it's a fantasy. Europe doesn't have this capacity to do it. It doesn't have the men. It doesn't have the equipment. It would take 15 to 20 years to put together anything resembling a fighting force. It has nothing of that sort. But they have this fantasy. It's the only thing that keeps these people, the establishment in Europe, together, and to rally around the flag of Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. The first thing that I am sure, there's a new prime minister coming in the Ukraine, the first thing he'll do, where will be the first visit? Probably not Washington. It'll probably be Kiev or Tel Aviv, because the deep state is orchestrating this. Is not going to let there be any backsliding in the UK with the change of government, from the commitment to increase military spending and to continue, as I say, with this program of specially designed cheap drones that they can send in quantities to Ukraine, as if Russia is just going to sit there and accept citizens in Moscow and St. Petersburg becoming increasingly anxious and frightened and getting killed by Europeans. And of course, as we spoke about before, when I said, pay attention to what Sergei Karaganov and others have said, that we need to have in Russia, he was saying about Russia, needs to have a restored deterrence. And the West needs to understand that, first of all, we will not allow this to escalate. We will not allow it to be a boiled frog, slowly in ever-heating water, of escalating missiles attack. We will strike at the decision centers and the structure in Europe, where these are made. They put out a list of the factories making these missiles attacking Russia. So they put this out, and they've said these are now subject to attack. And if you don't get it when we use conventional missiles at it, then we will consider tactical nuclear weapons. That is what you have to understand. We are determined to reintroduce a sense of fear. Europe has lost the sense, no, there'll never be a nuclear threat. It's all bluff. Putin keeps saying these things. We don't take it seriously. They should take it seriously. Russia has understood that the intent of the West, that is collective West, is to try and bring about the destruction of Russia. And they are now gearing up to defend themselves against that.
And let me ask you one more question, if I can. I know we're close to the end of the time.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. All right, great, because I think this is really, really important. So about 3 or so weeks ago, the Russian side, after a strike into Moscow and St. Petersburg, they listed this important announcement. They said, everybody, especially diplomats, you need to leave Kiev because we're going to come in and hit it like we've never hit it before, with decision-making centers and command and control centers, et cetera, ways we've never hit Kiev. And then basically nothing happened. Now, I think it was just yesterday, Sergei Lavrov said 2 months ago, we officially warned all of our foreign colleagues, both in embassies and representatives of offices and companies, that we recommended, in order to avoid misunderstandings, evacuate from Kiev. This recommendation remains in force. So my question to you is, based on your understanding of things, especially in light of this strike that also just happened in Moscow again, where Zelensky seems to be more confident to both strike into Moscow, St. Petersburg, issue ultimatums to Belarus, that Russia may now actually act on that. And then I got one follow-up question from that, but on that one first.
You're absolutely right. No, the mood and the sentiment has changed, and that's what was reflected in these meetings that I described. With first of all, those statements by Ushakov saying, that the anchorage, all the idea of negotiating with America is over. Can I repeat that? I mean, Ushakov said, we are not interested in negotiations with America any longer. We are going to resolve this issue by military force. That's what he said, speaking on behalf of Putin. And that was reflected also by others, including Lavrov, who described the Alaska meeting as a fraud, as a deceit, rather in terms of the Minsk agreements, and said America was never serious about this, and they've abandoned it.
And so what does that mean in your view?
It means they're not ready to negotiate with the United States or Witkoff or Kushner. They are going to use, there's going to be an acceleration of the military offensive. It usually happens around about this time. The land has dried out. It's going to, I don't know how it's going to take shape, but the balance of opinion has changed dramatically. Putin, I think, now understands that he's, perhaps left this too long. The war should have been ended earlier, because it's given the Europeans a chance to sort of get themselves together and start trying to produce this psychological attempt to hijack your American president and tempt him to join them in a more serious war against Russia. And that will be, this will, end up with at least tactical weapons being used against European targets, and can escalate. It is the height of folly, height of stupidity, and you don't hear anyone talking about this, really. It's all, first of all, it's about what's happening in Hormuz and other things, which are important too, I would add. But really, the fact that no one says anything, and that Europeans just go on talking about war, war, war. We're preparing for war. The Dutch say they are building concentration camps for Russian prisoners that they take during the war. They've built a camp, a prisoner of war camp there to prepare for this. Well, the Russians see all this and they hear all of this language. And so now finally, and it's taken them a long time, but they've come around to the conclusion, that the Europeans and America are likely serious in this, and we have to be prepared. And we have to have a ladder of escalation that we will mount against the Europeans. If they go on with this thing, they cannot just say, oh, well, we're immune because our missiles fly through NATO airspace. They pass through Finland, or they pass through the Baltic states, and they're NATO states. In Article 5, Russia can do nothing. Well, you'd be surprised, since it's the West that has torn up the rule book, international law, and all of the norms of warfare. There is no reason why now that Russia should observe all the norms as they previously have been doing.
Now, that's also very concerning, because they may be following in our footsteps, which is some bad footsteps. You say nobody's talking about this, not many in public. There has been one, though, and that was on our show just yesterday. And I'd like your view on this, because it really surprised me. We had a former British diplomat, Ian Proud, on, who served in Moscow for a number of years in the past before he retired from the diplomatic service. And he kind of surprised me because he said he is now concerned that there's a growing probability, I think is the word he used, that the Russians may use a tactical nuclear weapon inside of Ukraine as a precursor to potentially going into Europe, as you mentioned here. And he said he was growing concerned that there was a higher probability of that. How do you view that?
Well, I mean, I just don't think that any of us have that sort of inside knowledge about what actually is the tactical military decisions being taken now. But I think the outline of them is pretty clear. Yes, that we are going to see escalations taking place, and that at some point a tactical nuclear weapon will be, if you like, presented to Europe in some way. It will be used either against a European base in the region or against European manufacturer of these missiles, or it could be in Ukraine. But in Ukraine, it's not really necessary. I mean, the Oreshnik is much more effective because it's so precise. A tactical nuclear weapon is not a very helpful weapon. I'm telling you, you're a military person and I'm not, but it's a sort of one that spreads out and kills the population more than it is precise and accurate and doesn't do collateral damage. And a nuclear, even a tactical one, you can reduce, if you like, the element of it, but it is not quite in the same. It is not as precise as an Oreshnik, and they've got several varieties of the Oreshnik now, including some which are deep penetrating varieties of it. So it is. It's serious, and the Russians have announced that they are going to, and Putin announced that Russia is going to go full speed in developing new missiles, new forms of weaponry for the future and against the prospect that Europe goes on with its madness. Is there a hope that the Europeans will stop it? Well, that really depends on elections. But so many of these elections in Europe these days are sort of skewed by in support of NATO, in support of Ukraine, in support of Brussels, and parties that try and oppose those things find they're either banned or their leaders are subject to legal action, such as the French Marine Le Pen, who is still awaiting appeal to see if she can run for the presidency. I mean, we have to see, but the first place where it will change will be Germany, because the AfD, the alternative for Deutschland, is so ahead in the polls, and Merz is sort of languishing, I think, between sort of 15 and 18%. So sooner or later, Germany will trend, and typically, of course, the European Union is looking as to whether it should be necessary for them to ban AfD completely from elections. I mean, and so let me ask the most popular party in Germany is maybe
other than AfD. Is there really though any hope that elections could help? I mean, you look at the election in Romania not long ago. That had a lot of cloudy issues in there. Didn't result in anything really that's going to change anything. You had Viktor Orban was defeated. You had Merz replacing Schultz, and now here you have Andy Burnham is about to replace Keir Starmer, and yet you don't really see any change across the board. So is there hope?
There won't be any change. I mean, this is one of the things that I try and get people to understand. All the bridges from our present impasse to the future have been broken. They've been broken down by the insistence that there has to be a centrist coalition running every government in Europe that is pro-Europe.